Okay, think we're getting things all set up here to get our live stream going here for a moment. Chief Meteorologist Matt Lopon here as we are looking at a potential for active and severe weather. In particular, we're targeting this time frame next week, Tuesday in particular, where there's a potential that we could have maybe tornadoes as a possibility there, unfortunately. We've been watching this system for over a week. I believe it was last Friday in particular. We really started kind of honing in on what was potentially possible here. And so the thinking is that we're definitely going to have a fairly active pattern looking ahead toward that. So let's look ahead at kind of, again, the overall overarching theme of what we're talking about here for a moment. That is, of course, severe weather risk. That does include already a level 3 risk. We had one yesterday as well. About half of well, I mean, you can see state of Mississippi, and certainly most of the kind of western portion of Mississippi involved in that potential that could include, again, tornadoes as well as damaging wind gusts. A lot of different components that we're watching associated with this here. And it's not very often that we get a risk at this level this far out. So that's one of the considerations that we're looking at here. But there are luckily still some things that are somewhat out of sync. Time of day doesn't necessarily truly line up for a more significant severe event, but certainly something that we're watching here. So let's kind of talk through, again, a little bit of the overview. And I'm going to go with, the projection that I typically almost always, go with, and that'd be the European. I'm pulling this from College DuPage, a site I've used, frankly, since college here. And so again, over the course of the next few days, not much, kind of a weak wave moves into the area on Monday. And then this is looking at precipitation. Again, this is the overnight run of the European model, which is one that I feel pretty confident in usually, and one that's honestly locked into this very early on. As you can see, a pretty strong line of thunderstorms moving in. This is what we call 0Z Wednesday, or essentially that's going to end up being about around around Tuesday night, around midnight, leading into early Wednesday morning. What we're looking at here, the cumulative precipitation, gives you an idea of where the storms could move over the course of the few hours this has evolved. So this updates, every 3 hours there. So over the 3 hours, you could see, you get kind of a sense of not just the motion on it there, but also the distance traveled by some of these storms over that period of time that we're looking at. And so you can get fairly fast moving storms, likely a line of thunderstorms with spots on it trying to spin something up, as is often the case in these, like late February, early March events. There are still very obvious questions related to the amount of fuel out there, moisture. And we look at that. One way I like to look at it is using the dew point to measure moisture based on the same scale as the temperature. And you'll notice it is not super duper high. And I want to give a comparison versus previous runs here, kind of give you an idea on how moisture has trended on this. As you can see, the moisture, this would be looking at the run last night, and then overnight, you can see there's been a little reduction in the amount of moisture involved there. And that's one thing that hopefully could be a little bit of a limiting factor. It's one of the few things that's been limiting on what this model, this European model, has shown us from the beginning. It's been a lot of things. Limited has not been one of them. So we get rid of that here for a moment. Let's come back to the main moisture here. And what I want to kind of analyze as we go back in time there is that front that we have kind of come through. It's kind of a push of drier air this weekend. We already don't have a lot of moisture around here, but then there's this kind of push of drier air this weekend that comes in. You can see the browns indicating drier air, and that's something that kind of affects us. If I do that comparison and we do previous runs on where we're at now, you'll notice that the amount of dry air on that initial push is a little bit greater. You kind of see, looking at the purple line there, I mean, that's not the part of the state we're necessarily talking about, but you see how it's definitely farther south, run to run. Or, for example, the dew point there in Tupelo at 29, 28, 27, 26, 23. That drier push over the weekend is one of the things to watch as to whether or not this verifies as a significant severe weather event. And so when we look at this severe weather risk area, that is one of the questions as to how far north the moisture gets, and then that impacts the type of thunderstorms we end up seeing. Do we end up seeing more discrete individual thunderstorms ahead? That's where you start talking about a greater risk level if that ends up being the case. So again, thankfully, still some questions associated with this as well. I'm looking at different website here, Pivotal Weather. They they have subscription services. If that's something that interests you. But I'm looking at this to see the strong winds aloft. Definitely still a core of very strong winds aloft. This is also an older model run. But the reason I wanted to come to this is actually I wanted to show you the model comparison. It's on this side, I think, a little bit easier to kind of compare some of the various projections, side by side here to get the positioning of that upper level jet stream. So you can see some of our projections a little stronger when you look at colors. This represents a river of fast moving air in the upper levels of the atmosphere that helps to get storms organized, drive them in their direction, and cause them to spin. It's one of many low areas that we look at this. Some very strong winds aloft. The GFS is what we would sometimes call the American model. And there's no necessarily, it's just run in the United States on computers in the United States versus European run. And it's, countries modeling, especially high level computing modeling, is an expensive business. So there are a few of these places around the world that do that, mostly government or government adjacent entities there. And so the takeaway on this that I'm looking at here, and again, I think that's 2860. Okay, so this is a slightly newer run on the European, has some AI stuff in that there. Some smooth, tends to be a little smoother on what looks like smooth, not necessarily a good thing. That means that, kind of sometimes there are perturbations, things that you would miss out on. But you can see generally the positioning aloft, something we're still working on here, and the positioning of that jet max and how it aligns with what's going on closer to the surface remains a bit of a question on this. So luckily, again, we don't have, I can say, where I feel super duper confident on everything, but I will say that this is the least confident I've felt on this in the last few days. And I still feel like we're going to have a fairly significant severe weather chance around. It's just we're talking super high end versus significant. That's the question. So going back to that moisture, this is kind of key on where it's at. You'll notice there's a big variety on the positioning of this. This would be looking kind of midnight there. Let's go back here, and this would be close to around 6 p.m. on Tuesday. And you'll notice the moisture, depending on which projection, still has it around. And so that's why timing is different. And there are some projections that have significantly more moisture. But the takeaway on all this, we are still refining timing. And as this moisture continues, the lower level features, there's typically, this is Friday. So we have Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then Tuesday. So, we're 4 days out. So these things will consolidate as we get closer and get in higher resolution projections. But definitely enough evidence there to say moisture should be close. Strong winds aloft could very much line up. And if those two things do line up in the quantities that we definitely could see, significant severe weather, tornadoes, damaging winds, I'd say a possibility. But these are the things that I'm going to be watching over the course of the next couple of days, kind of determine how significant is that severe weather event. So I come back to this for a moment. What do we expect? What do we think could happen? So when we look at this, I think it's as moisture increases and we get a better idea on the positioning, the angle of that upper level jet, I do think we'll probably see an expansion of the risk areas and potentially an upgrade in the risk level as well. When you look at the risks, it kind of paints this bullseye, right? But the thing to keep in mind is that this is math, right? These bullseyes are determined based on math. And so the more opportunities you have, the greater the color on that 1 to 5 scale. We're looking at levels 2 and 3. We don't get the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, NOAA. Good folks there. We rely on them for what we do in a lot of different ways. But they don't put out a level 1 risk when we're at this time frame out. So it'll still be a couple more days before we see that. That's why that isn't listed here. And if we were to see a level 4 or greater risk, typically that's going to come a day or two in advance, if not the day of. Typically it's the day of, as confidence increases. So still some big questions around that there. But we do expect, I think it's reasonable to assume we'll see an expansion in this area and potentially an upgrade. I mentioned the math on the opportunity. And so where that upgrade to a, say, level 4 risk would come would be if we saw the discrete individual storms developing ahead of the squall line, and those storms weren't likely to occur in a great enough quantity and not large enough number of them that would then enhance the severe weather threat. All of that to say, you need the discrete, you need the squall line, you get them both, you probably get that level 4 moderate risk. The discrete is a question based on the lower level moisture in particular. The squall line is not. In that squall line that will come through, we'll have spin up style tornadoes. Now the question is are they just minor EF0, EF1, which is still significant damage. You saw what we had in Shannon. And in Itawamba County a couple weeks ago, that EF1 tornadoes are significant. We had one that was almost up to EF2. When we start talking EF2 or greater, that's when we refer to that as strong tornadoes, and EF4, EF5 would be violent tornadoes. I don't know that we're talking that high end yet, unless we are talking about the potential for those discrete storms and the moisture lines up. The strong winds aloft are going to be there. We'll work on the alignment, but certainly the potential remains there for a high-end severe weather event. Confidence is not there yet, and a greater risk area seems reasonable if you get those individual discrete storms, and if this at all times a little bit earlier. I think for us, peak time frame is probably going to be late into the evening, probably after, say, probably late evening, we'll just say now. And probably after dark. If it speeds up, that then enhances the potential that we're talking about, those discrete storms and tornadoes. So certainly going to be monitoring this over the course of the next few days as confidence increases. You can follow us, as you can see there, down in the corner on all those different social media platforms to get the very latest on what we're expecting and when we're expecting that. But keep it here for the very latest information, and we'll try to keep you updated on that. On a personal note, I'm not going to be live on the air tonight. Family and I, they get credit over in the other room. We are doing the Mardi Gras thing down here in New Orleans. The kids got lots of stuff, lots of beads. It was I'd always heard from Craig Ford that it was very family friendly. It absolutely is very family friendly, and that's kind of an awesome thing to experience. But certainly, kind of a good time and something we'll enjoy. So we're probably not going to be on the air until probably next Monday again. With the latest on that. So we will see y'all soon, and appreciate y'all following.